may include a photograph or a video that MOD's technical specialists can examine. It may include radar tapes showing an anomalous object, tapes that correlate to visual sighting. Or it may include good eyewitness testimony from pilots, police, military personnel. But this small percentage of good unexplained cases illustrates the central problem of the UFO phenomenon when it's looked at by governments of the military. Because we can say with a high degree of certainty what these UFOs are not, but we can't say what they are. And, for example, in relation to the sightings at Cosford and Shawbury that I mentioned in 1993, we did a very detailed investigation. But of course, when we submitted this to the Assistant Chief of the Air Staff, his response to us was to say, well, because you have done such a thorough investigation, there's really nothing else you can do. So this is rather like an unsolved crime in a police file. And we use that analogy because with an unsolved UFO sighting, we say that like the unsolved crimes, until or unless you get some new piece of information that emerges, really you cannot take things further forward. So these unsolved cases just sit on the files indefinitely. And again, this is a big problem for us. I should just mention again, perhaps one other thing in relation to these near misses. In 2000, the Defense Intelligence Staff commissioned a highly classified study into the UFO phenomenon and examined some of the cases that we already had in our archives. This was codenamed Project Condign, and at the time it was classified secret UK eyes only, which, apart from top secret, is one of the highest classifications that you can use in the Ministry of Defense. It was declassified, and it's on the Ministry of Defense website now, in 2006. But it specifically looked at some of these pilot reports and these near misses. And it made a very interesting and controversial and rather thought-provoking recommendation. Oh, let me make one point before I tell you what the recommendation was. As General Bermudez was saying this morning, we did the same in Britain. One thing that we did is we did not like the word UFO. We found in the Ministry of Defense that it was an unfortunate word because it had become synonymous in popular culture with alien spacecraft. Now, of course, what we then tried to do was say, let's get away from the word UFO and use a more scientific term and a term that has less baggage, less emotion, less incorrect meaning associated with it. So we too used the phrase UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. And on one or two occasions we used another phrase, which again, when a pilot didn't like to say UFO, sometimes a pilot would use the phrase unusual aircraft. So sometimes if you look in some of the files, a pilot who does not feel comfortable making a UFO report will simply say, I encountered an unusual aircraft. Maybe you can identify it for me. So the recommendation in Project Condign said, and this is a direct quote, when intercepting a UAP, pilots should take no action other than to try to place the object astern where possible. Now that's a very interesting statement to make, because what it's essentially saying, in rather scientific language, is we don't know what these things are, but keep out of their way. And as I say, that's in one of the most highly classified reports that the Ministry of Defense ever produced on this subject. I want, in the time available to me, to touch on these other two stories, because again, you may have heard some material about this. On 1st of December last year, with no public consultation, with no formal announcement in Parliament, the Ministry of Defense terminated its UFO project after over 50 years of research. And they did it in a very controversial way, which has been heavily criticized by the media and the public. Because they took a document on the website, on the Ministry of Defense website. The title of the document was How to Report a UFO. And it gave the postal address, the email address, and it had a short policy statement. On 30th of November, they edited that document, changed all the contents, and said, we do not believe that our years of study into this have highlighted any threat. We believe that defense resources, budgets can be used in a more productive way. So accordingly, we will no longer accept reports from the public on this or investigate sightings. But the sneaky thing is that despite making this change, they kept the title the same, How to Report a UFO. So one of our newspapers ran a headline called How Not to Report a UFO. But now they've changed the title. But I think they were hoping that they could make the announcement without the media noticing. But you know, when you try to hide something from the media and they find out, it's worse for you in the long run, because this really made the Ministry of Defense look very bad. I think they were probably being truthful about why they terminated the project. Arguably, we were no closer solving the UFO mystery in 2009 than we were in 1951. But it's very interesting, if you look carefully at the words of a statement that was given to the media about this. They said, we do not believe